We're in a series called Storyteller. We're looking at parables from Luke. And I was thinking about, I'm pretty comfortable with things that I can earn. Maybe some of you feel the same way. Grades, degrees, promotions, paychecks, trust, respect. I'm not afraid to work hard to get the things that I want. And so when I get those things, then it's easy for me to tell myself I have them because I've earned them. Because I understand how earning works. You show up, you do what's expected, you work hard, you get the result. That's why grades make sense, right? That's why if you finish the coursework, you get the degree. Paychecks make sense to me. Even trust makes sense. You build trust over time. Grace, though, grace makes me a little bit uncomfortable because grace shows up where effort didn't. Grace doesn't ask for a resume. Grace doesn't check your attendance record. Grace doesn't ask how long you've been faithful, which is probably why I relate more to today's parable than I'd like to admit, at least more to the guy that's kind of the bad guy in this parable more than I want to admit. We're going to look at the prodigal son today. This is probably my favorite parable. It might be your favorite too. Now, Jesus, he tells us this story not to confuse us about grace, but to expose how quickly we start treating something like we've earned it instead of it being a gift. Because the truth is, a lot of us are good at earning things, and that's exactly why grace is so hard for us to receive, and sometimes why it's even harder for us to celebrate when someone else is given grace. Now, a little context, we're in Luke 15, and you can open that up if you want to follow along. The religious leaders of the time, they're becoming increasingly upset with the kind of people that Jesus is surrounding himself with, right? With the company that he's keeping. And they're like, man, if you want to be a religious kind of guy like us, you're going to have to be a little more careful about the people that you hang out with. And Jesus wants to communicate to them what exactly is the most important to God, what matters the most to him. And so Jesus illustrates the importance of lost things. And he does that by telling 3 parables. Now, Becca did such a great job with the first 2 last week. I was really proud of my friend watching that message. And he starts with the parable of the lost sheep. And he says, if you have 100 sheep and you lose one, you go and search for it. When you find it, you celebrate. And then he has the parable of the lost coin and said, if you've got 10 silver coins and you lose one, well, you go and find it. When you find that coin, you celebrate. And then he gets to the parable of the lost son, frequently called the parable of the prodigal son. Now, prodigal, it's someone that spends money freely or recklessly. They're kind of wastefully extravagant, but it's called the lost son. And just like in the previous 2 parables, Jesus says, hey, if you've got 2 sons and one of them walks away from you, when that one returns, what you're going to do is you're going to celebrate. Because what's most valuable to God is not in just what you have, it's in what you've lost returning to you. That's the heart of God. And this amazing 3rd parable, it will show us some incredible lessons and some reminders of what is so amazing about God's grace. So here's the main point, and then we're going to walk through the story. It's that God's grace is unearned, it's unending, and it's open to everyone. So we're going to look at the prodigal son. It's Luke 15, 11 to 32. If you haven't been here for this before, I'm going to tell you the story in hopefully like a more modern context, but I'm going to keep all the stuff that needs to be in there and you can follow along in there. And if you think I didn't do a great job later, you can tell me. Give it a little bit. It's been a long morning. Like maybe that's a Monday email if you think I didn't do a great job. But I'm telling you, I'm going to walk through verse by verse. And if you read it, you'll be able to follow that. So Jesus, he talks about the lost sheep. He talks about the lost coin. And then he turns his attention to a family. And he starts talking about a man, and it turns out this is a wealthy man. And this rich man had 2 sons. And as often happens, the 2 sons are very different people. The younger son is the adventurous one. He doesn't want to be held down anymore by his father's fields and vineyards. He's worked enough, so he thinks. He's been doing this his whole life, and he's ready to take on the world, or he thinks he's ready to take on the world. And so he goes to his father, and he makes this really unimaginable request. And he says, Father, give me my share of the estate. Now, we can see in Deuteronomy 21:17, the older brother would receive a double inheritance. So the older brother would get 2/3, and the younger brother would have received 1/3, a single share. So really what he's saying is, Dad, I wish that you were dead right now so that I could get my 33% of your money and I could get out of this place. It's a slap in the face. I mean, it's a horrendously insulting, awful thing to ask. It's the kind of thing you might think about asking, but you would never actually say out loud. But he does it. And we can only imagine the sting and the pain that the father feels, this hurt, this rejection, this feeling of being discarded even after everything he's done to provide this life for his son. But Jesus says the father did it. He divides his inheritance and he gives it to his son early. He divides his property and he gives him his inheritance. Heartbroken, undoubtedly, he lets his son go as he wishes. Now, not long after that, the son gathers up all his stuff because he now has what he needs to leave. And he does that. He gets his wish at the small price of his father's broken heart and devastation. Now, it must have been a pretty sad day at the farm, the day the son actually left. Right, the wise old father, he knows the son has everything he needs. He's got the perfect mixture to make a huge mess. He's got a lot of money. He's got zero experience, and he has the confidence that he knows everything he needs to know about the world. And so he sets off to a distant country, and there's the father standing there, maybe on the porch, just watching him walk off until he disappears in the horizon. Now, in our time, it's probably New York City or Los Angeles, right? He's got to go to a big city. He's got to see what the world is all about, and he does. He finds out. But it turns out the world can be a pretty harsh place for somebody in his shoes. It says he blows through all of his money with wild living. Now, we don't know how long this took, but it's probably a pretty good amount of money. So it's going to take some time. We can assume a decent amount of time goes by for him to blow through all the money. I think we're talking months and years and not just days and weeks. And wild living isn't specifically defined, but not a lot's really changed there either. We can make some educated guesses. It's drugs, alcohol, gambling, probably some unsavory women, things like that. Well, just about the time that he completely runs out of the money that he has, two things happen. One, he suddenly finds out everyone who was his friend when he had that money is no longer his friend now that he doesn't have the money. And two, there's a severe famine in the land. So now he's broke, he's unemployed, he's in a distant land. He's got no family, no friends, right? He's got no food. He's got no job. His pets' heads are falling off, right? He's got all of that. He has nothing. He is nothing. And for the first time in his life, he has no one. No one's there. Some of you know that feeling. Some of you know that rock bottom kind of feeling that if you've ever been in, you pray that you never end up in one of those again. And so he makes the only choice he can make, really a choice of self-preservation to get himself a job. But he doesn't have any connections. He doesn't have a lot of marketability. I mean, you can't put entitled punk on the resume unless your dad is the CEO of the company, right? That's just how it works. So he ends up working in some fields, feeding pigs. And listen, we have a lot of farmers, and farming is noble work, right? But it is hard work. Morgan Freeman said in the 2003 movie Bruce Almighty, some of the happiest people in the world go home smelling to high heaven at the end of the day, right? Because it's noble work, but it's hard work, and it can be disgusting work. And he's in such a bad spot. While he's doing this, he actually looks at the pigs and he gets jealous of the pigs, of what the pigs are eating. No one's even offering him that much. And as he's there staring at the pigs, being jealous of what they're eating, he has this moment of clarity, right? If it's a cartoon, the light bulb goes off over his head and he says, do you know who hires servants and treats them better than this? You know who actually feeds their servants and gives them more than enough? My Father. My Father does that. Why am I out here starving to death? Here's what I'll do. I will go back and I will make a big speech and I'll win him over. And so somehow he scrapes together enough money to begin the trip back home. And as he's on his way, he begins to work on his speech. He's like, Father, I have sinned against heaven and I've sinned against you. And I'm no longer worthy to be called one of your sons, so make me like one of your hired servants. And picture him walking down the road and building up his courage and saying, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you, and I'm no longer worthy to be called one of your sons, so make me like one of your hired servants. There he is, practicing it and getting it just right. But things don't go according to plan, according to the story that Jesus tells, because while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And the father's filled with compassion for him. And he runs to his son. When he sees him in the distance, he's like, is that him? And he sees him and he runs because he's filled with compassion. Now you're picturing this like beautiful emotional run, right? Like chariots of fire. It's like, boom, 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 right? It's not like that though, because he's not wearing joggers and a t-shirt. He's wearing what would be like a dress to us. And it was considered really undignified for adults, especially adult men, to run. Like jogging wasn't a thing then. So this is kind of ugly, right? This is an ugly run. It wasn't a beautiful scene, but it was a beautiful moment. And he gets to his son and he throws his arms around him and he kisses him. And the son, he's like, okay, I was ready for the speech. And he's like, Father, I have sinned against you and I've sinned against heaven. And so I'm not worthy to be one of your sons. And he stops. He doesn't even let him finish the speech that he's been working on. The father turns and he says to the servant, quick, get my nicest coat, get the gold ring, get my good sandals, the sandals that don't smell like sandals yet. Somebody kill a cow, somebody start the grill. Tonight, we're going to have filet mignon, right? Let's celebrate, right? And they start some music, right? They got a DJ there. They're ready to go. The party is going. And he says, my son was dead. My son was gone. I thought I'd never see him again, but now he's alive. He's here. He's with us. He's been found. Drinks on me, everyone. But if you know the parable, it doesn't stop there. It doesn't end there because we have the issue of the older son, right? This one who never left, this hardworking, super responsible firstborn son who has always done what he's supposed to do. And he never quit. He never walked out. He never broke his father's heart, right? He was never going to give you up. He was never going to let you down. Oh, man, Rick. Right? He wasn't going to do that. He was never going to round and desert you. He's still out in the field, right? We're on it, man. We're on it. This was a flood 5 hours ago. Now we're just plugging on all cylinders. There's the son, right? He's plugging along like the good, diligent, obedient son that he's always been. And he hears this party going on at home. And he calls over one of the workers. He's like, what's that all? Is that cool in the gang? Like, what's going on back at the house? And he's like, you didn't hear? Your brother's back. Your dad, he's serving filet mignon to celebrate. You should come. And the older brother is livid. I mean, he's beyond livid, truthfully. He starts thinking, well, it turns out my younger brother isn't the only lavish, wasteful one in the family. Now dad's going to throw a stupid party for my stupid brother who never should have left in the first place and definitely shouldn't be rewarded for these kind of choices. And he keeps working in the field and he refuses to attend the party. Well, at the party a little bit later, his father looks around and he notices and he says, hey, where's Trent? Right? And listen, if your name's Trent, I'm sorry, but this definitely fits. The older brother's name is Trent, right? He's like, where's Trent? Is Trent's not at the party? And so he goes out and he pleads with him. He's like, come on, Trent. Come on, listen. I thought Brock was dead, right? And the younger brother's name is definitely Brock. I don't apologize for that one. He's like, I thought I would never see him. I thought he was gone and now he's back. He's alive. He's home. Come and celebrate with us. And he looked at his father. And he yelled at his father and he said, look, I've been slaving away for you for years and I've never once disobeyed you. I've never called in sick. I've never even clocked in late. And you haven't so much as grilled hot dogs so my friends and I could celebrate. But he runs away and he blows a third of your money and tries to destroy himself. Suddenly when he comes back home, he gets a party. He gets steak because he has no other options. No way, Dad. No way. And the father says, again, I think he's filled with compassion here. He says, my son, you are always with me. You've been an incredible son. Everything I have, son, the farm, the fields, the vineyards, the house, everything is yours. No one's going to take that from you. But don't you see, we had to celebrate like this. Your brother was dead, and now he's alive again. Your brother was lost, and now he's found. How could we not celebrate? And we don't really get any resolution past that. The account ends there. We don't know if Trent came into the party. We don't know how Trent and Brock's relationship went from there. But what we do end up with are some of the greatest and most powerful illustrations of God's grace and some incredible insights into it. Now, we're going to start with the last one and just kind of lightly touch this because Becca did such a great job last week. And the first thing is that God's grace is open to everyone, right? We see this in the life of the older brother. He represents the self-righteous people, those of us who can lose sight of what grace has done in our own lives. Because Bob Goff said, grace never seems fair until we need a little, right? It doesn't seem fair until I need it. I learned this maybe the most clearly, and I realized this a little bit later in my heart. We were at a Cincinnati Reds game a while ago, Amy and I and her brother and his wife, and we go, and it's great American ballpark, beautiful field, and we get cheap seats way up, on the first baseline in the upper deck, and we're sitting there, and it's like third, fourth inning, and we're like, man, look at all those seats down there. No one's coming. Let's just go. So we go right down, and now we're just off first base a little bit. Great seats. Joey Votto hit 3 home runs. If you're a baseball fan and you care about that, it was a good day. But we're sitting there in our now free seats because we used to be up there. And it was cool until some people came and they sat a couple rows in front of us. And do you know what I thought? Those aren't your seats. Those aren't yours. You didn't pay for those. I genuinely thought that. I was like, how dare they do that? And then it was like this moment, right? Where God's like, those aren't your seats either, but you're up there. How quickly we forget what has been given to us when we see it given to someone else. So is there a family member, is there a coworker or a neighbor that you don't think is as deserving of God's grace as you are? I can't believe God would forgive them. Or maybe you would say, I don't even want God to forgive them. I want you to know God's grace is not limited to my comfort zone. It's not limited to what I think is fair. And so we just have to realize and acknowledge the places in our lives where maybe we're becoming a little more like the older brother than we should. Because we're not going to encounter anyone this week who God doesn't love, and we're not going to encounter anyone who his grace does not extend to. Next thing that we see in this account is that God's grace is unearned. This is the essence of God's grace. It's undeserved, unearned, unmerited favor. None of us deserve it. But somehow some of us do, right? We start to get deluded. I have these moments where I start to think I actually do deserve it. But the son wasn't welcomed back into the family because he deserved it. He wasn't welcomed back in the family because of what he had done. He was welcomed back in the family because of the Father's grace. Pure and simple grace, nothing less. Brendan Manning tells us that God loves you as you are, not as you should be, because none of us are as we should be. Don't you love that about God? Isn't that so humbling to think about, to remember? Now, that doesn't mean that he leaves us where we are. We know that. God loves you. He loves you as you are, but he also loves you way too much to leave you there. But God loves us as we are. The son being welcomed back into the family in such a loving and lavish way, it wasn't actually about the son at all. It was about the Father. The Father is the real main character of this parable, this loving and forgiving Father whose character remains consistent throughout the story. It's a beautiful picture of God. It's who God is. It's who Jesus wanted us to see him as in this parable. And you know what else? It's who God has always been. It's who he's always been. That's why King David was able to write this about God 1,000 years before Jesus told this parable. Psalm 103, 8-12. The Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbor his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. As far as the east is from the west, so far has he removed our transgressions from us. Man, someone here, you needed to hear that this morning, or you needed to hear that truth today because you're trying to earn your way out of a hole that you've sinned yourself into. Listen, here's the bad news. You can't. But here's the good news. You don't have to. You don't have to because of that grace, because God's grace is unearned and it's undeserved. And once we understand just how undeserving we are of this grace, we're in a perfect position to see the importance of this next and final lesson in this parable, and it's that God's grace is unending. You see, because it is not and was never deserved, that allows it to be unending. It allows it to be enduring. Because if we had to earn God's grace by being good enough or by being loyal enough, then it would no longer be unending because now it depends on us. And it doesn't. It doesn't depend on us. It's unending. The Father was always going to forgive the Son. At whatever point he came back, if he came back after 2 months, if he came back after 2 years, the Father was always going to forgive the Son. He was just there waiting for him to come back. Now, did it grieve the Father that his Son treated him like that and left? Absolutely, of course it did. But the question for the Son was not whether or not the Father was going to forgive him. The question for the Son was how many nights did he want to sleep in pig slop? How long did he want to do that? Listen to me. God will forgive you. He will. That's not the question that you need to wrestle with. The question you need to wrestle with is how many nights of your life do you want to spend sleeping in the mess of your own sins? Because God's grace is there for you and it will continue to be there for you. So how long are you going to wait until you come back to him? I didn't make the choice to get sober a little over 16 years ago in my life because I thought that God wouldn't forgive me anymore. All right, I theologically know he would forgive me. I just got sick and tired of sleeping in the mess of my own sins. I got tired of making my wife get caught up in that mess, of picturing my kids someday being pulled into that. The question was never whether or not God was going to forgive me. The question was how much longer I wanted to sleep in the mess of my own sinful choices. And that kind of unending love and grace, it changes us. It changes who we are. I don't try to live a life free from sin to earn God's love because I can't. But knowing that unending love, it sure has helped me sin a lot less. Henry Nouwen said this about the Father. The Father does not love his Son because he's changed. The Son changes because he is loved. Make sure you get the order of that right. It's so crucial. So I just want to talk to anyone that came in today and you're carrying guilt and shame and remorse and regret. The people who know all too well that you are undeserving of God's grace. That may be your primary feeling. I know I'm not deserving. I want you to hear this clearly. God's grace for you is unending. When we sin, we separate ourselves from God, right? He'll let us go. He's a God of free will. He's a God of choices. Just like the Father in the story, he will not force you to stay. He will not force you to love him. He will not force you to follow him. But he's also waiting for your return. And he's not just waiting, right? He's not just passively waiting. That's my favorite image of the whole story, is that the Father is there. The only way he knew the Son was a long way off is because he was waiting for him to return. What does that say about the heart of God towards people and sin? It says there's nothing that you've done that God will not forgive you for and allow you to return to a relationship with him. And that's why the Apostle Paul could tell the church in Rome in Romans 5:8 that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. You see, your perfection was never part of the deal. It was never part of the equation. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were still totally undeserving, while we were still a long way off, that's the time he began to run toward us. That is when he extended that grace, that undeserved, unending grace that was for everyone who would turn back to him and come home. So what about you this morning? What about you this morning? Where are you with this grace? Maybe you just need the reminder about the grace that you've received, the grace that you've been freely given, and to remember not to become stingy with what you've been given for free, not to deny something others that they don't deserve when we know just as well we don't deserve it either. Or maybe you're somebody here today and you're still sleeping in the mess of your own sins. And you want to come home, but you're wondering if God's grace is sufficient for you. You're wondering if he will be waiting for you and if he'll see you while you're still a long way off and if he'll run to you. He will. He will. He's standing on the porch right now looking for you, watching the horizon for you to start coming through. Is today the day that you do that? Because God's grace is sufficient for you, and it is sufficient for me, and it is sufficient for anyone else who will turn and come back to him. Let's pray. God, I thank you for this grace, and I thank you for the incredibly powerful way that Jesus illustrated this. Lord, I pray that everyone here, Lord, in this room or watching online or listening later, God, that we would know that grace. God, we would know that feeling of seeing the Father run toward us while we're still a long way off.